It is the glory of God to conceal a matter. To search it out is the glory of kings. This is the Message to Kings podcast.
Hi everyone, happy Father's Day weekend. I want to take this time to catch up with you, the podcast audience, on topics like Facebook, the podcast reviews, and a book launch on Resilience Awakening, a fictional book we have publishing through Elk Lake Publishing as of now. It just published. So let's start with Resilience Awakening and what they call a writer's journey, because that's what it is. To become an author, it's quite a journey, typically a very long one. When I got saved and set on fire for Jesus in 2003, I had a strong desire to do something that it didn't come naturally for me. In fact, before I was a believer, I didn't enjoy writing or being creative. In fact, I didn't really do much creative at all. In fact, it was my worst subject in school, was creative writing, English, and such. But all of a sudden, I had a strong urge in me, an urge to do something I didn't want to do before I was saved. It was to write and craft stories, to be a writer, to be an author, so I spent the next 2 years writing a work on historic fiction, which I never got published. I tried, but it was rejected by 7 different publishers, so I put it aside for a while. And it wasn't until 2013 when I created the Message to Kings podcast that I started to have a desire to write again. After moving to Seattle in 2016, I knew I needed to pick up the pen again, and I finished a different work titled 10 Prophecies. And this was a fiction work set in the time of Daniel with the part 2 in the time of Jesus. And I actually wrote this book for you, the podcast audience, because I was inspired by that podcast special where I felt like I just kind of put the listener and even myself in that place of that prophecy about the virgin birth at the time of Isaiah. Unfortunately, this didn't get picked up either by a publisher. And eventually I'm just going to have to, even if I can't get it published. But it was a fictional account of the 10 major prophecies of Jesus, actually written from the fictional perspective, written like an eyewitness. All right, at this point, after that didn't go so well, and there's a little overlapping timeline here, but I joined the Northwest Christian Writers Association. And at that time, I joined critique groups and learned how to be a better writer. And I gave it a go again, and I found the joy in writing. And you guys were patient, podcast audience, as we waited for more podcasts and kind of gave it more timelines and everything. But I gave it a go again in 2020 with a sci-fi allegorical work titled Resilience Awakening. And I pitched it to publishers. I first showed it to my critique group and others, and they were just like, what a story. And it was picked up by a small to medium-sized Christian publisher called Elk Lake Publishing. And I've been working with editors and senior editors, and the final copy looks really good. So you can find it now actually on Amazon. Just search for Resilience Awakening, Bret Easton. You'll actually see the podcast out there too if you go on Amazon.com. So you type in Bret Easton, you'll get the podcast because you can actually play it through Alexa now. But you'll also see this book. There's a Kindle edition and then there's a paperback edition. So that's a bit of a journey, and it's quite a normal one for an author, unfortunately. Becoming one takes time, and let's just say it takes resilience. So this is from the back cover of the book. In a cosmos created by a mysterious entity called the Voice, dangers lurk for the home nebula. The Vidor have attacked, and the galaxy needs a new hero. Kivor Astilius is called upon to recover the lost stellar gates and to locate allies in their struggle for survival. Suffering from the death of his father, he must face the challenges within and before him. The crew of the Resilience must race home before it is destroyed. They tear through the galaxies, evading corporation agents, rogue gangsters, drone vessels, alien corsairs, and galactic fleets while bursting through wormholes and black holes. Their journey brings them into contact with a host of races and peoples, culminating in a clash of galactic empires and a moment of awakening for a new hero. It's totally an allegory, set in a Star Wars type world. And if you don't like sci-fi, sorry. Some don't, and that's okay. C.S. Lewis didn't believe in talking lions, but he wrote Narnia to express the price God would pay to redeem mankind. This was created for the believer and the non-believer to teach and to show spiritual truths and to engage readers in a different way. I've written the story from a biblical worldview. Obviously, I had the sci-fi space part. There's no, beings in outer space, but it's a story with an allegorical element as the voice that created the universe. There is a heroic death in the novel that speaks to our Savior's death and his relationship with his son and those after him. It's fun, it's adventure, it's lighthearted, and I hope it blesses you. So as for the history purist out there, don't worry. I'm working on another work which I think is super cool. After studying every battle and war in the Bible, and I've studied them all, I want to apply this worldview to history. And the next work I'm working on is it's a study of the Civil War and the World Wars from a biblical perspective, looking at cause and effects of global conflicts from the scriptures of the Bible. And I think my findings might surprise you, pointing to spiritual causes and effects of wars throughout history. So this work should be completed this year, and hopefully we'll publish it early next year. And then we'll get back to that 10 prophecies story, because I think it's pretty cool and I think you guys will like it. Also, there's a kids chapter book I'm working on with my daughter Madeline called Flora of Amoria. So there's lots in the works. Let's just say we're having fun being creative. So many of you ask, how can I support the program? First of all, pray for us. Pray for Message to Kings to really communicate the love of the Father and to tell the story with great passion and wisdom. Please send encouraging emails to messagetokings@gmail.com. Those are awesome. Please continue. Please connect with me on the website, messagetokings.com. And it's getting a refresh. So if you go out there, you'll see there's all sorts of extra articles and links. Even there'll be a link to the book as well out there. All right, so let's talk about Facebook. Obviously, Facebook doesn't want us to promote Christian and conservative values, which means they don't play fair. For years, the Message to Kings page has been hard to get to. And I've tried to correct that. I actually set up a personal account to spread the word about the book, connect with the web page, and the podcast. I set up a personal account, and then I made a post, and it was, why do they take God out of history? And then I spoke about the podcast, and I gave links to the podcast, and then all of a sudden, I can't get in. I literally got dropped. I guess I'm one of thousands that have been deplatformed for teaching biblical history. I don't know. Maybe it was that exact post. Why did they take God out of history? I should have known something was up with Facebook for years, because there's been, exponential downloads of the podcast compared to Facebook, likes and follows. The page was virtually hidden for years, and now I can't even get to it. If you can get to it, I can't. So I promise I didn't do anything political. I just made a post about biblical history. All I can guess, I've been dropped, I guess, for teaching biblical history and values. So what I want to ask you guys to do, obviously we can't use Facebook to promote the book, much less the podcast. But I ask you guys that you've always found it on iTunes, right? You always found the podcast out there. I'm going to ask reviewers from now on to review the program. I'd like for it to spread. I can't do it through social media. So I ask you guys to promote the podcast the best you can. And I ask all the listeners out there to give it a review. I never really liked asking people to do reviews, but it seems to be the only way to make sure you don't get deplatformed in the future. So I heard the algorithms of the podcast and programs of social media platforms out there, They always steer people away from Christian sites and articles, generally speaking, especially Facebook. But the only way for them to pop out is for you to like, share, and review them. In the case of iTunes, it would be reviews, and that would be the case on Amazon as well. So this is where I ask you, listeners, I ask you to please review the podcast on iTunes. Ignore any haters and reviews out there. There are a few. Some I can learn from, but some that are ridiculous. And I guess it's one of those reminders that I'm actually on track, that persecution verse. So your review really counts. If you're a faithful listener, please review the program. It means a lot and helps others to find it. Also, if you're up for it, buy Resilience Awakening on Amazon. Give it a review on Amazon. Reviews on Amazon equate to sales. That's how that works. And more people will find it. And there's actually something about Resilience Awakening. It's an allegory. And at the end of the book, there's a letter to the reader. And it explains each person and their character and what they represent. And it calls out to every individual to listen to that voice that calls out to them, which is God knocking on their door. All right, everyone. Thank you. Your support is greatly encouraging. And I thank you for all the listeners out there. We end this episode with the trailer again for Resilience Awakening.
Welcome, adventurers.
In a cosmos created by a mysterious entity called the Voice, galaxies fight for dominance and survival.
Resilience, tickets to 12 burn.
Kaivar Astelius and the crew of the Resilience are sent to the farthest reaches of the galaxies to recover the stellar gates and to find lost allies.
I offer you immortality, adventurers.
Kaivar, it's all of them, all the Vidor, their entire fleet.
Fire.
In this galactic race across the cosmos and fight for survival, Kaivar and his crew will come to understand more about themselves and the mysterious power that guides and works all things for good. Resilience Awakening. Set to release June 20th, 2021. Find it on Amazon.